Hello and welcome to Maiden, Matriarch with me, Louise. My guest today is Alex Kaschuta, host of the Subversive podcast. We spoke about online gender wars, how internet culture has a tendency to warp real-life relationships for the worse, how we can protect our children, how to choose a child's peer group to try and avoid them being sucked into internet chaos. And in the extended version of the episode, we spoke about the effect that being too online has had on our politics, mine and Alex's, and whether we're massive doomers because we spend too much time on the internet. That extended version of the episode is available at louiseperry.substack.com, where, as always, you can find the back catalogue of extended episodes, the MMM chat community, and also the bonus episodes I do fortnightly with my husband. Enjoy. Many of you will know that Christianity is a subject of fascination for me, and the role of Christianity in shaping the modern world is a theme I return to again and again on the podcast. My view is that we really can't understand the world or ourselves without getting to grips with it, which is why I'm very glad to point you towards a new online course called 321. It's an introduction to Christianity that's imaginative, thoughtful, engaging. It assumes absolutely no prior knowledge. It's presented by the wonderful Glenn Scrivener, who has been a guest on the MMM podcast previously, and I've also been a guest on his show. Glenn presents 8 video-led sessions which are based around some beautiful animated stories that illustrate the Christian message. You can check it out for free at 321course.com/MMM. Just enter your email, choose a password, and you're in. There's no spam, there's no fees. Just visit 321course.com/MMM. And now onto the show. Alex, let's start by talking about how the internet has a tendency to radicalize people in their hatred of the opposite sex, both men and women.
Yes, I mean, this is a phenomenon I've noticed as being someone who's a bit of a talking head online. I've started doing this, whatever this is, podcasting, writing online about 3 or 4 years ago. And to me, at that point, things seemed not the way they are now. Maybe it's just my perspective from, having gone through the successive waves of whatever's happening online. But the incentives that these platforms set for success on them, I don't necessarily think are very conducive for any sort of relationship between men and women. We are at the point where it's reached almost like, Rwandan radio level of genocidal hatred between the sexes, and it doesn't seem like it's dying down. I think it's actually just kind of speeding up because you have this interesting dynamic. I mean, interesting. It's essentially how these platforms are monetized currently by impression, and this is post Elon Musk takeover, who was kind of vaunted as this savior of free speech. I think in many ways he has been. He's taken off controls off of a few things, but he's added a little bit more. I mean, this was always about impressions. You either sold your product, you either sold ads, or it was always about getting eyeballs. But now it's, you literally get cents on the eyeball. So there's quite a lot more incentives to post for engagement. So people tend to post engagement bait. And a lot of what's very popular nowadays, and probably has been since the dawn of time, is gender discourse, sex wars, and the way these are fueled is by the outrage anecdote. So you have especially scissor issues where something's seen a little bit in one way by women, something's seen a little bit in a different way by men. Happens all the time because we have different, incentives in relationships and in love and everything. This is all from, paying for dinner to, how many people one should have sex with, modesty, all sorts of conversations have come into the open marketplace of ideas. And what you have is this kind of infinite line of mirrors where you have one faction observes the products of another faction. Let's say there's a seed video that's probably from TikTok, has nothing to do with gender discourse. One of the genders or sexes, excuse me, present something about, I don't know, an observation about themselves or whatever they've noticed about the other sex, and then that kicks off the discourse, and everyone's kind of fighting because this is a bit of a split thing. And then there's one line of reactions. One party reacts a certain way, the other party reacts certain. Then the party's next set of mirrors is they react to the reactions, and with every set of mirrors, things get more and more unhinged because the people reacting to the first set of reactions are typically, the talking heads are trying to shove this into their narrative, about divorces, about, men being pigs, about, there's all sorts of perspectives that need to be promoted because, people are selling ebooks, people are, trying to get money from trying to get the Elon bucks. So, by the time you reach the last set of mirrors, you have spawned other, these things at, the third, fourth set of row of mirrors, you have seedlings for another layers of discourse because things are already kind of unhinged at that point. So this has been going on for a very long time. And, every couple of days, there's another video of a woman making, I don't know, shakshuka on the weekend. And, people are going wild.
I remember the shakshuka one, yeah.
Yeah, women dancing in, parking lots. And it's very interesting. And, I think another layer to this is that, this is obviously the Western internet. You have kind of a core Western audience, but there's a lot of kind of more clannish styles of thinking about gender relations that are coming in. There's a whole set of people who, anonymous mostly, who have kind of like Roman statue avatars and things like that. Not all Roman statue avatars, but some of them, who are almost invariably from, South Asia, and, are commenting, adding all sorts of layers about purity, modesty culture, covering up, things like that. And these are a lot of the people in the third, fourth row of mirrors, and so I think these are slightly unexpected additions to the discourse in the West. These weren't necessarily themes back in the day, but I think they also play into some of the problems that people have in the West, and therefore they're much easier to propagate. So people do, they play into resentments that already exist here, and they add new spins, new flavors to them, a spiciness that was not present in the discourse before, and also make them exponentially worse. And, this ties also, I think, into the rise of Andrew Tate, who's a clear representative of the multiracial coalition of the unloved. And he really does.
That's the title for the show. There we go. Episode
Yeah,
title nailed.
I understand his appeal in a way, but his appeal is also based on the fact that he is, he's a mixed race guy. He has a certain way of presenting himself, very flashy. This is not preppy. This is not WASP culture. This is not, Ralph Lauren. This is, very much Russian oligarch / Dubai style of presentation.
Out of Luton, yeah.
Exactly. Out of Luton. Yeah. Many good things come out of Luton.
No comment. Something I wonder about, so I share this distaste, right? I also log on and I'm like, this is, on the one hand, you cannot help but be to some extent influenced by this this propaganda. It's not propaganda in the sense that anyone's designing it as such, really, but it functions as propaganda in that you are bombarded with these images of human failings, particularly gendered, and you cannot help but think, oh yeah, men are like this, women are like this, whatever. But I also have been online for long enough now to sense that it seems to me that it's got more stupid, it's got more deranged, it's got more sort of transparently propagandist. But then
Exactly.
I don't know whether that's just because I'm an edgelord. And the thing that I don't like about all of this is that it's now passé. Do you see what I mean? Is it just that I find all this gender wars stuff particularly distasteful because it's reached the point now where it's stopped being a sort of new and fresh and interesting.
Yeah, I think there's
discourse.
definitely that. Yeah, no,
And
that's
it's
a good observation.
yeah, You're an edgelord too, right? So
Oh, definitely.
do you think you're experiencing the same kind of
Yeah.
displeasure?
It's the disillusion of, there was a certain time, I think, very much associated with the kind of early, maybe not early, I wasn't here for the early days of the dissident right, but sometime like 2019, 2020, there was kind of this red scare, cool girl, polia infused misogyny that, was like kind of I think a reasonable reaction to the dullness of the blue-haired feminist, the people, what people call the longhouse, HR departments, like, the burden of bureaucracy, and also the observation, the very legitimate observation of sex differences. The thing that is not sayable in polite company and in companies is that men and women are different, and that poses challenges that cannot be overcome by just saying men and women are not different. And there are all sorts of issues that spawn out of that. I mean, obviously, your book is a very important milestone in the discussion about that. And what we have now is a little bit further from that, because my fear is that it's just the substrate of the internet is not conducive to finding truth. It's conducive to leveraging status, to creating brands. You want to have a clear brand, like someone like Pearl Davis has a very clear brand. She can really leverage, she can really push that. Someone who's like, oh, I think a little bit of this, I think a little bit of that, I'm kind of I've got different flavors. That's not a brand that you can grow. You might have a few hits, a few threads or a few pieces that people are interested in, but you're not the I hate women lady. People want the I hate women lady because it's like, whoa,
Yes.
there's a lady
She's very
saying
good at
this crazy shit. So
she's really good at the algorithm, Paul. Like, to her
exactly. And
credit,
she's
she's
really
absolutely
proud of it. I
nailed
mean,
it.
if I see
Yeah.
she's like, a lot of times when people come and contradict her on her show, she's just like, so what's your platform like? How many millions of subscribers do you have? It's like, oh,
It's
okay.
like, yeah, fair dues, I guess.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is how things are measured, and this is how fame works on the internet. And you see it decimating some people. And yeah, I mean, it's for me at least, being someone who's kind of dabbled in, being both an edge lord and also trying to be honest about things. Maybe I'm not business savvy enough. I don't know how to I just don't have the stomach to build a brand on being, the lady who says this to a big audience because they like to hear it. It just makes me a little bit sick. I know it's and the thing is, like, I've paid a bit of a toll in my own audience, because yeah, I mean, it's hard not to tell people. Evading audience capture is quite hard. And every time I've posted something, in the last year or something about, or went on an interview, trying to be a little bit more nuanced about this whole sex wars thing, it was a big flop monetarily. It was really, it's a big hit. People want that, feminists don't come to me to listen to, gender discourse. My audience, because I'm an edgelord, because I'm on the right, is typically men. And if you tell men that the statistics on divorce that are peddled everywhere are not quite accurate, your favorite red pill influencer might not be the statistician that they pretend to be. They don't like to hear that, so they unsubscribe and they leave. So it's not.
The incentives are all wrong.
Yeah.
And basically well, I think about this a lot, right? Because we're both in the same business. Yeah, if you want to make millions on the internet, if you want to be as successful as Pearl or Andrew Tate or whoever, and well, Pearl's not quite a household name. Andrew Tate is basically a household name at some point. I know there'll probably be some people listening who aren't very online and don't know who Pearl is, but I can assure you, like, she's
She's
made a lot
the
of money on the
I
internet.
hate woman lady.
She's
That's
the I
pretty
Hate
much.
Woman lady, yeah. Yeah, if you want to be as successful as them, you do basically have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And the thing is that if you look at if you go on YouTube or something and search like most popular first, the things that will come up once you filter for the children's stuff is my YouTube most popular, like the thing that I actually watch on YouTube most often is for my son, because he likes watching videos of kids playing with their Thomas tank engine toys, but like anyway, if you filter for that stuff, which is probably actually what YouTube is mostly used for, you come up with alarmingly dumb stuff, right? Like the lowest common denominator stuff is quite shocking for someone who doesn't normally consume that. But that's because obviously, like most people aren't that smart. Most people aren't interested in having the nuanced, sophisticated stuff. And I sort of think, fine, like fair dues. But it does mean that if you want the biggest possible audience, then you have to be catering to that audience. And you can choose not to. You can say, and that includes all the rage bait, right? You can choose not to. You can say, no, I'm fine with having a niche audience and earning less money, which is, I think, the decision that you and I have both made. But there's a cost, and a lot of people would rather have massive amounts of
Or
cash.
they're true believers. I mean,
I
I
guess
think you
so.
need a bit of that to fuel that. I mean, I guess at one point you're so audience captured that you can't go back, but still, it's a bit, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe you make yourself a true believer because you want the success, and because it's very affirming to have lots of growth. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
You'd have
I
to
think
ask
you're
Perry.
right. And the thing is, if you have a podcast, you're going to invite people on who typically mirror what you want them to say. You curate all this type of stuff. So the bubble that you're in is pretty much based on what you've already been consuming. There's not really any incentives to engage critically with anything. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they're probably both. Why not both?
Yeah, and then the problem is, of course, that people are. It's an interesting thing, again, to talk about how the sausage is made. It's an interesting thing about podcast interviews that it's really rare to have a podcast which features antagonistic interviews, the kind of Jeremy Paxman style interviews, because unless you're so massive, like BBC Newsnight, that you can invite people on with the expectation that, particularly politicians, with the expectation that they're going to have a horrible time. Um, why would anyone come on your show if that was the expectation? So it's very much in your interests as a host to, even if you invite people along with whom you disagree, to be not to be antagonistic, to be nice. But it does mean that it means that if podcasts come to be the kind of dominant entertainment medium, in contrast to, say, mainstream news shows, you are going to have a lot more mutual back scratching in all of the conversations. It's going to be a lot less debate and antagonism. I guess one exception to that would be the whatever podcast. It sounds silly in an English accent, which is designed around confrontation. Why do the Oh, we should explain what it is.
Yeah. So the Whatever podcast is a podcast kind of ostensibly hosted by Christian men or men who are virtuous and high value,
I didn't
who
know that they were supposed to be Christians.
I think
Okay,
that's the idea.
cool.
And they bring on women who engage in OnlyFans, I guess, or escorts, or involved in porn, and debate them because they want to save their souls. So I think the consequence of that is that there are a lot of little clips of men saying that you're completely valueless now because you've engaged in these activities, and the women respond in babbling something confusedly at the host, and then millions of people are just like, okay, yes, women are kind of dumb,
Yeah,
and they're
women
just
are
kind of.
terrible. I knew it.
Indeed, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Women deserve less. And that's kind of used by a lot of gender discourse as, kind of a representative examples of womanhood. It's also used by the women who come on. Like you said, there's not really, why would these women go on there if there wasn't some incentives? Because their OnlyFans subscriptions boom after they go on this very popular podcast that a lot of people consume. Coincidentally, also, a lot of the high value Christian men who watch this podcast to save the souls of these very large breasted ladies also tend to consume their content, sadly, I probably regretfully, after watching the show. So there's a flywheel here. It's quite an interesting process to witness. The what's that called? Bootleggers and Baptist type dynamics of of the Whatever podcast.
Yeah, my goodness, yeah, so many different types of human sin, like meeting in this one podcast. Yes, okay, so in that instance, the incentive for the women to go on the show, even if they're going to be humiliated and met with a lot of antagonism, is that they can make money in some other fashion.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other, I guess, interesting and maybe a little bit frightening aspect of the whole thing is that, all this gender discourse that we have now online obscures the fact that this is not the first rodeo of this battle. I mean, someone who's studied feminism quite more attentively than a lot of people online knows that this has come in waves. There were kind of contractions of social liberalism, and then obviously there was a bit more conservatism. I mean, the 1950s were a sort of backlash against a previous period who that was much more liberal. Obviously there was a lot of consequences in terms of family dissolution, fatherless children. These waves come and go, but what you have now is that the waves at the moment take, let's say, maybe 3 or 4 years, and it seems to be things are crunching a little bit more, and I think that's an interesting phenomenon. And I think the way the online now is very much indistinguishable, especially for younger people. The people who should be having the children, who should be forming the relationships, who should be interested in the opposite sex, them indulging in the psychotic narratives of 60-year-old divorcees on Twitter or wherever they access this information, or on YouTube, and becoming absurdly risk averse about activities they haven't even gotten to engage in. You don't even try to put your toe in the water because everyone says no, it's actually lava. Don't even think about it. I think that's pretty much the dangerous thing. Like we're inoculating children. I mean, the children have access to this information. They watch this stuff. It's really disconcerting. I mean, I remember I wrote an essay a few years ago about my worries about having a son. Now I have two sons, and kind of the problems that were evident to me at that point. The frictions between the sexes, all sorts of issues with family formation. DEI and the job, all of the things that were extremely relevant, and I think are continue to be relevant to this day. But if I had to rewrite that essay today, I would probably focus on the fact that I would never let my children, engage with this type of content. It's absolute soul poison. It's not informative. It's not illuminating. It's not putting them on the right path. I don't want them to think about what color their Bugatti is going to be. This is absolutely terrible stuff. And yeah, I mean, I hope it's there is some sort of synthesis that we're going towards, because there are obviously a lot of energies as a backlash now, because this stuff is uncool. The idea that the next right wing coalition is going to be with especially people who believe in so-called elite theory, that the elites are essentially the people who craft the future, is going to be with the mass of men who can't get a date. That's the populist mass of men, multiracial as well, of men who are unloved. I think is a mistake, because this theory, this proposition of so-called pussy communism would work maybe in a different era where wars and hand-to-hand combat was quite prized. But nowadays I think it's going to be a big flop, and it's already looking like it's going to be one.
Sorry to clarify, what's pussy communism, Alex?
I mean, to be honest, a lot of the fights that people have online is that women have extreme standards. I know if people aren't familiar with online discourse, I'm just going to try to summarize, kind of what the main points are. Marriage is not a good deal for men. Women have extremely high standards. They're not high quality women. They have slept with other men before. They're not virgins. And that there's the whole idea is that this is kind of a new development, that the internet has allowed women to all flock to chads. The chads have harems, and 80% of men, 90% of men, 99% of men have no one to engage with, and they would really want to get married if they could, but they can't. So the idea is that a lot of restrictions have to be put on women so that they have no choice but not to be picky. And these restrictions involve things like disenfranchising them from the vote, no education, not letting them do many things that they do currently that is not allowing men to woo them with their, I guess, economic prospects, because men have fallen behind. We know this, and women are, have not only caught up, but they're doing really well in education. They're taking over jobs. So the idea would be to squish women down so that comparatively men can rise up and get their woman. And with all this heavy government intervention that would be involved to actually suppress women working, women's education, all of this stuff, would be kind of the idea that to each man his, according to his needs, and he would be kind of given a wife by the government, either directly or more indirectly by the fact that she would be destitute if someone didn't step up to take her.
Yeah, so rolling back not just the second wave, but the first wave, and
Yeah,
maybe the Industrial Revolution as well,
exactly.
by men who themselves would not have
Yeah, I
would
mean,
have
a
been
lot of
disenfranchised before
exactly. A lot
suffrage
of
because they
them
would have
say
let
that
property
they'd give up,
concentration.
indoor plumbing for the idea that they would have a government assigned wife, and that life is not worth living without one. And I think my theory is that things have gotten very easy. Sustenance is easy, shelter is easy, status is not very easy, and like the acquisition of a mate is not very easy. So status and the acquisition of a mate are still kind of libertarian spaces. Like, it's pretty hard for the government to intervene, to kind of trample their boots in and say, you're going to have welfare for the fact that you lack romantic prospects. And I think this is jarring because really everything else is easy. And essentially that's kind of the claim here, that they want this to be easy as well. Um, but it just isn't, and it's not gonna be. So it's, I also obviously agree that things have changed, structurally, but the idea that 300 years ago it was much easier to acquire a mate. Depends how you define easy. You would have to woo not only her but her parents. You would have to, like, endure the wrath of her brothers. If you made a bad move. The idea of casual sex. I know that women are apparently the prime culprits of casual sex, but I've heard of men also enjoying this type of facility sometimes. That was just, not, maybe it was heard of, but it was, quite heavily punished by direct violence. All of this is, a bit pie in the sky. And I think it kind of revolves back to what Mary Harrington always says, like, everything stay the same except what women do. And, like you said, this is all tied into the Industrial Revolution. Um, it's I don't see the way out of this, but through. And there are also clear implications for birth rates. I think people should really consider this. But the idea that we're going to roll back the Industrial Revolution to fix birth rates, not going to happen. Birth rates will continue going down until there's another equilibrium. There are populations who are growing, like the Amish. They have no problems. The future is probably going to be more religious. It's going to be more multiracial, whatever people want to think. And there's going to be a balancing point for all of these. This is not the first time that fertility has declined.
Yeah, I mean, which might, in a sense, mean it's not quite the same as rolling back the Industrial Revolution, because the Amish, for instance, do use some modern technology. They're not completely there's a more of a hybrid than many people realize, but it probably does mean um, returning to something much less modern in
Yes.
one way or another. But yeah, the idea that a kind of the pussy communist revolution is going to see incels have women allocated to them doesn't seem very realistic. And also, actually, I mean, a more sensible version of the red pill historical narrative points out that most men in many periods of history did not get any mates, and particularly in polyamorous cultures, and that actually, the more tragic outlook on this history is that is the male expendability sort of hypothesis, where no one is giving you a pure peasant wife. Like in most sets of circumstances.
Exactly, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of the people who really want a pure peasant wife have not toured the villages of vaunted Eastern Europe and places where these women are sourced. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not sure if they would comply to the standard of the modern man in many ways, but maybe they would. Who am I to say? Yeah, there's a lot of this is a cruel space. Being picked, it's quite, there's a lot of emotional turmoil, a lot of an impossibility to de-risk this stuff. You also have this on the other side as well. A lot of people, women who used to be traditional homemakers, coming out and declaring that, okay, my life is destroyed now, I've been left, I have no resources. There's a lot of stories there that don't necessarily represent the actual lived experience of the masses. A lot of women, if they can stay home, take care of their children, there's a lot of good marriages out there, but the internet is just one big pit of anecdotes and scare stories, and 5 million ways in which you need to de-risk your relationship with the opposite sex. It's yeah, I mean, this level of risk aversion is, I think, a big driver of the issues that we have with fertility, and the issues that we have in general with with young people. Just they're not getting driver's licenses. People are still slowly getting absorbed into this stream of the internet, because yeah, it's much more comfortable. You can create a little bubble of ideas that you like, that confirm your biases, that confirm your life experience, confirm the idea that you shouldn't be out there talking to women, you shouldn't not want a family, because have you heard of what happened to trad wife X? She got taken to the cleaners, and now she has to take care of 17 children by herself. It's really scary that this is the new lore that's being implanted. This is the new wisdom that people are receiving, because it's not representative, I think, of most people's experience. It is for some, but yeah, I mean, I think if I have one purpose online, is to communicate to people that, okay, you know things aren't easy. Relationships between the sexes definitely aren't easy. And I think it's very useful for people to understand sex differences for their own relationships, for, managing, essentially their relationship with the opposite sex in marriage and dating. But the idea that, you can take all the potential downsides of women or men and then just classify them all, women are demonic and men are just the devil, is just, yeah, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I feel like at the beginning of this, it looks like there's like the only way is steeply downward. And yeah, I don't know, it just feels very scary to me, and I regret if I've ever, poured gasoline on this fire, because, as an edgelord, I have in many ways. And yeah, I don't think this is good. And even people who make an income from this, I feel like there's going to be an after the orgy moment for a lot of these people, and they're going to be like, this is this has been disastrous. So I mean, I hope there will be, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just a bit optimistic about people's ability to get over their cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
I had Jeffrey Miller on the podcast a little while ago, and he discussed this paper he wrote some time ago, suggesting that is it Fermi's paradox, the fact that seems to be no other intelligent life in the universe.
Hmm.
He suggested that one answer to that solution to that paradox might be that when a species reaches a sufficient threshold of intelligence, that it's able, and technological sophistication, that it's able to create a virtual reality which is more satisfying than reality,
Hmm.
it ends up just entertaining itself to destruction in terms of not reproducing, not doing the things necessary to continue their civilization and so on. And so that's why you end up that's why we don't see evidence of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. And I mean, entertainment maybe isn't quite the right word for what you're describing there. I guess it is entertaining in a sense. I mean,
It
it's like
is.
entertainment that
It's
makes people
myth
feel really
making.
bad.
Yeah, because I think a lot of what's happening online started with the so-called meaning crisis. People were, yeah, were starved of meaning. They covered the basis of Maslow's pyramid, but the top was elusive. It's a bit problematic to figure out what to do if you have too much time on your hands. So you had new atheism kind of spawn from people twiddling their thumbs and navel gazing a bit too much, and all of the successive things are all of these like surrogate activities that we have to do to figure it out. And then so we started myth making a bit more than we used to, and it happens at a faster pace. And people really do love to consume this content, and it kind of this tribal allegiance to whatever thing that you have online, even be it mommy bloggers of a certain species, as a fellow mom of small children, about the sleep training wars and, what should babies drink and things like that. This gets very heated. The tribes are quite consolidated. People spend a lot of time thinking about minute details of their life and, building these new tribal allegiances out of these ideas. And yeah, it feels like it's filling up people's time quite well, and obviously it trickles into politics. There's a lot of things that are related to child rearing that are right wing coded, that used to be left wing coded. Like, for example, stance on vaccines. It was very much kind of a crunchy hippie type thing, 20, 30 years ago. Now it's very much a right wing thing. It's very interesting. I think people like Catherine D, who do this type of analysis on subgroups and on the internet and kind of internet lore, internet culture, and they observe these fluctuations and kind of how identity formation happens on the internet. It is fascinating, but it's also it's a ticking bomb, I think, in many ways, and in ways that maybe we can't even decipher at the moment, because they have a mind of their own. Their platform sets some certain incentives. You can kind of predict where things are going to go, and you can kind of see where they've already gone. And like I said, I don't think these are good developments for anyone. But how fast these cycles of movement to backlash are going to happen, and how intense they can get, who knows? I think you've got things like TikTok. You have new types of media. 10-second video, like you didn't have that 5 years ago, or you have the, but it wasn't like an established thing. You had Vine or something like that. Now you have this whole new space where you can, which is also extremely addictive, where you can just like seed little nuggets of ideas, and where it's extremely cutthroat competitive, the way you present things. Yeah, I think it's really it's a whole new world of discourse and of myth making and of who we imagine ourselves to be in relation to the internet, but also in relation to each other. Like it's really, I don't know. It's really creepy in many ways, I have to say.
To be contrarianly optimistic for a second,
Please.
do you think that there's some people are like exquisitely offline?
hmm
You occasionally encounter them, like in the
Yeah,
wild, and
they're gonna seed the world very
well,
soon.
right, yeah. Like one of my favorite memes I have saved on my phone, because I am sufficiently online that I have my favorite memes saved on my phone, is the offline Chad, the guy who I can't remember all the lines around his face, but one of them is like, man, that's crazy. Anyway, I have responsibilities to see
hmm
to. Right, like some people seem to be relatively immune to this and just not very interested in it, or maybe they dabble in social media in a benign way, but otherwise they're fine. And there are other people like you and I who are probably kill up too many of our brain cells with the internet, but still have managed to, you have two children, I will soon have two children, hopefully. We're like, we have happy marriages, like it's okay. Do you think that there's, I mean, we have no way really of knowing what proportion, but do you think that there's just a subgroup who are really vulnerable to basically the kind of Skinner's box of the internet, and they maybe will just be heavily selected against in this evolutionary bottleneck, and that's not too big a problem?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a things traits are not equally distributed, as we know, and some people are a little bit more sensitive to this stuff. Um, I agree. I think also the quality of the stuff is changing. That's kind of my fear. Like I know a lot of people who are, the so-called boomers who cannot like take their phone away. If the internet
That's true. It's
turns
not
off,
yeah. There's no
and
generation that's immune to this. Boomer phone addiction is
it is pretty crazy.
really
Like
shocking. Yeah.
I if I'm in company with people, I can kind of hide my phone addiction. I put it away, and then I just kind of
Yes.
do weird scratches when I get bored. But then it's okay. But the boomer, a lot of them, obviously, you have either two splits. You either have a completely offline boomer who does not dabble in this. Has Facebook to put 3 pictures on like once a year. It's fine. But if they do get into it, there is a special degree of obsession with, Netflix. I mean, I've heard people just falling down the stairs because they couldn't stop their, watching whatever reacher on Netflix while they were going down the stairs, slipping in the shower because they were watching something. Yeah, it's a new world. But like you said, I think the fact that we have good families. There's a certain perception online where people like us who are married, have children, are still online. Kind of are a bit like doomer, like I am. Oh, things are getting scary because I am online. I infuse all this stuff. They all think like they've got the last chopper out of Nam. You know, that was the last month in which online dating worked, because I met my husband online, and I used the power of the algorithm to conjure a worthy husband out of the ether. We met online, we got married, we have beautiful children, everything's fine. But man, after that, nothing is possible. I can't believe, like, dating is terrible. But people were saying the same thing back then. Is dating much worse now? Probably, but there are other things like maiden, mother, matriarch, matchmaking, the 4 M's. So that's one direction. There's all sorts of new ideas that people come up with, either tech enabled or a little bit more analog, that might fix these problems. But yeah, I don't know. It is a bit worrying to me, and I think I'm extra worried because I know how susceptible I am to being addicted to these things. And I see my friends who have older children, especially boys, they are just completely decimated by video games. There are no expectations on them. They just you I just don't see any universe in which I'll allow my boys to coast like that, because this is not Atari. Like, the stuff that they produce nowadays is super immersive. It's got exactly the right, dopamine triggers at the right points. I'm sure that if I started playing whatever Red Dead Redemption or whatever people are playing nowadays, I'd probably get immersed in it myself. But I know,
You
don't
might
touch.
not, because it's particularly good at scratching male itches, because it simulates war and adventure.
Probably. And Twitter is perfect for scratching my itches, which simulates gossip.
Yeah, exactly. Being a bitch on the internet, like
Oh
that's what
yeah.
we that's what we crave. Yes, okay, so it's easy enough to say in the abstract, as I just did, like, a kind of who cares. If there are some people who can't help themselves
Yeah, the
with
Richard
internet addiction.
Hanania view on life.
Yeah, but you don't want your child to be that person, do you? Like, if yeah, I mean, I would just move heaven and earth
I
to,
think that's probably why I'm
yeah.
so kind of irritated by the internet and all this gender war stuff. And I haven't really been posting that much in the last, I think, 2 years. I've just like occasionally posted. I'm just kind of lurking and like horrified, because I'm a bit more sensitive because I have children now, and I'm really concerned about the world they're going to inherit and their prospects of finding a mate, because I don't think being married just to be married is the be all end all of life. But I would like them to be married because I know that having a good marriage is, many notches above, being happily single. Having a
Mm,
terrible marriage is probably worse than being single, an
mm,
abusive marriage where people, so I think there has to be some sort of social technology, some lore, some culture, something that allows them to guide them towards a happy marriage.
mm.
And whatever is out there now, that I see from my bubble, is absolute, like,
It's not
poison
encouraging that.
to
Yeah, it's like
no.
it's anti-social technology.
It is, and it's
Yeah.
promoted by literal, like, sociopaths. It
Yeah.
really, that's why I was saying, that's the it's what is an influencer? Present company excluded, obviously, but you do need to have some narcissistic traits, some a bit of like sociopathy, even just to be able to put up with the onslaught of people telling you that you're dumb and stupid and whatever every day, and not care enough to continue. And yeah, it's definitely a technology that elevates people who might be suffering from either personality disorders or personality gifts, as maybe the internet is just a way to monetize your personality disorders and turn them into a strength.
Yeah, fame is really bad for you psychologically, and I think that I'm strongly of the opinion that Dunbar's number, the idea that you only really have the brain capacity to have about 150 relationships. So that's the size of a typical hunter gatherer band, and indeed like a school year group and an army battalion or whatever. I'm probably getting that wrong, but anyway, I don't think that being known by more than 150 people is psychologically good for you. I think that if you know that there are people on the other side of the world who know who you are and you don't know who they are, it's very destabilizing. And there's a point where pretty much everyone who reaches a certain fame threshold either goes around the twist, like is, as you say, a narcissist, so is in some sense not psychologically normal, so maybe can withstand it, or kind of opts out and just hides away. And I don't like, I'm nowhere near that threshold, but I do sometimes have that feeling. I think it's very good to log off and go touch grass and go have things in your life that are much more important than strangers on the internet knowing who you are, to stay normal. Because, yeah, it's deeply, deeply, the whole thing is deeply, deeply destabilizing. And then people having parasocial relationships with those like destabilized personalities is also very bad. So I do completely agree with you that the whole internet ecosystem couldn't have been better designed to like mess up people's relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I think touching grass is going to be, it's a big trend. Getting offline. I mean, people say they get offline, they don't always manage it, but I think it's going to get more and more intense because the level of disturbance that being on these platforms causes is getting clear. And I think the data is mixed, but you can see a lot of changes at least happening to especially young people who have internet access, phone access, all this type of stuff in the last years, and then that they can, find communities of like-minded kids to whatever discuss mastectomies and things like that. Yeah, I think it's quite visible that there's a step change in the speed of cultural transformation for adults, obviously, but also especially for children who are very impressionable and who are looking for inspiration, guidance, mentors, and all this stuff at a very in, yeah, easily influenced age. I'm worried, but at the same time, I can see that there's people are trying to roll back a lot of this stuff. I think there's
Mm,
probably just going to be a bit of a divide based on conscientiousness as well, which, like you
yeah.
said, there's going to be a certain amount of people who are just kind of stuck in the VR set because they don't have the character force to leverage themselves out of the chair and get out in the world, and have agency. Their agency is going to be completely consumed by whatever slop they're feeding on the internet that day. And there's going to be a whole cast of people who become pretty much offline except for the I guess Google Maps and the very important little things working at very specific hours and using analog technology to help them, like you had that really excellent essay recently about how you write, and it's I a very very good system, I have to say. The longhand, the fact that you have to step away. I also get trapped in these research loops where I just research an article for 6 hours and then I'm just like, what exactly am I doing here? So yeah, if you have that capacity, you have to employ these tools that are not of the internet to get things done, and to yeah, to still cultivate that agency that pretty much every dinging bell and whistle and light flashing wants to take away from you. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time, and it's going to be more and more assortative mating, more splitting of sub people according to their traits. And yeah.
I mean, you see this already with some of the creme de la creme of like the American tech elite, for instance, who, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, to his credit, having just said you reach a level of fame where you either are a complete narcissist or go around the twist or opt out. I guess he's sort of in the opting out thing. I've seen him doing things like learning traditional swords, how to make swords traditionally, and doing a lot of like sport and whatever. I mean, clearly a lot of them have worked out that you need to touch grass by doing offline activities. But also, I mean, I think it's also not coincidental that there's an association between that kind of elite professional sphere and doing intense exercise. Like CrossFit is sort of famously popular among those guys. It's because they're very conscientious and very conscientious and driven, and very conscientious and driven people are also driven to do things like intense exercise and ice baths and not drinking and being really whatever. So yes, I think you see this kind of bifurcation between the people who basically have the personal qualities which can allow them to withstand the limbic capitalist system, and the people who don't. The problem, I guess, is that pretty much all teenagers are in the not having those characteristics bucket, because just by virtue of their age, not by virtue of their personality necessarily. And so, what as a parent, you have to try and like get your kids who may be quite conscientious as adults, but you need to like get them over that terrible bridge so that they avoid being sucked into the machine before they can reach adulthood and then make more rational
And it's
decisions.
such a challenge because, like for example, here I'm in Romania. My children are now, one of them's going to kindergarten. They're out of phone age, but a lot of the discourse here is that you want children to be tech savvy. So giving them, letting them play iPad games and things like that. Teaching them about the platform, having a laptop. They have to have a laptop. Is all about them learning the language of technology, that they're going to be left behind. It's all about the knowledge worker. You want them to be able to manipulate symbols, not to move dirt around. I can understand that. And the problem is obviously, what group of people, what cohort are you going to let your kids play with? Because maybe the stage that we're in here in Romania is just a level of development. It's just a stage of development. Like my husband always bristles against how status is communicated here. We're still in the Russian oligarch stage of cultural status development. It's all about flashy stuff. Every jacket has a logo. Everything you need to
There's a
have.
reason Andrew Tate relocated to it. Well, there are a few
Of
reasons, but
course,
one of
yeah.
them is yes, it suits his aesthetic, I guess.
Exactly, exactly. So Andrew Tate is pretty much like the most demure and the most subtle exponent of Romanian flashiness. And yeah, my husband's like he's from New Zealand. He's Anglo, and he's very understated, and it's just not done, and he thinks it's very strange. So I think maybe in terms of how children relate to technology, we're just at that level of development. People remember in living memory how it is to toil the fields, and everyone's got a grandmother who lives on the farm, and they definitely do not romanticize trad life here, because it
Right,
really
yeah.
it was tough even like 5 minutes ago. So everyone wants to have a high status job that involves a computer. So and I think maybe it's the growing pains to seeing, okay, what does this actually involve. And yeah, I mean, my fear is that the West and technology in the West and jumping of stages, like we were kind of a semi technology. I managed to live about until I was about 20 before I actually became addicted to the internet. I was on forums even earlier a little bit, but I had to go to internet cafe to access the internet. It just wasn't so available. So we kind of have this mixed life, pre-tech, post-tech. Kids now don't have that. It's very hard to see how someone who's grown up completely immersed on the internet with social media, TikTok style videos, and all this type of stuff since they were like 8, 9, 10. Watching YouTube Kids all day. I don't know exactly what they're going to look like. Maybe they're absolutely well adjusted, normal people. Maybe it's absolutely fine. And I think there are studies that say that that might be the case, that, a lot of this fear of, kids watching screens is a little bit overblown. Like many of the fears of, environmental factors effect on kids. But at the same time, it just really does feel like a lot of social phenomena have gone, you know, gone awry since the advent of less so the internet, but maybe the iPhone, and the fact that you have the internet with you all the time. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my worry. I think we're probably going to move to New Zealand, so that's other pathologies, other problems that I have with New Zealand. The trans stuff there is quite surprisingly intense. But yeah, you don't have this push to constantly shove an iPad into your kid's face. So you kind of have to pick your battles and pick the cohort, especially that you think your children should be growing up in. I think that's probably the best thing that you can do. And I think that's why maybe private school and, shelling out the money for that and trying to essentially pick the group that's going to be influencing your kids, religious schools as well. So our plan is boys' school, religious, New Zealand, because we like the Anglo vibes, and we also here, my cousin had his daughter is in high school here, and kids are like, they have 700 euro trainers and things like that, and I'm just like, I can't take that. That's just not. I'm not going to participate in that whole thing. So we're going to go to the island and try to navigate social mores there. But yeah, that's very rambling, many tangents. But
I basically have the same instincts in terms. It's a very yes. How to pick your children's peer group is the key challenge in how to not have their brains melted by the internet, and it's quite tricky because I mean I had so there's the kind of two options I have at the top of my mind as possible options are well I suppose there's also homeschooling. It's not
tough.
really tough, and it's not really possible for us in terms of like losing an income, which is what that necessitates. In the sense of where would we have to move in order for it to be that losing an income wouldn't be a problem? Somewhere where we don't know anyone, basically, is the answer to that. And then like trying to do something necessarily isolating, like homeschooling, becomes even more difficult because you don't know anyone because you're very isolated. So okay, so putting that off the table for the time being, although of course there are people who do that successfully. Um, Alternative schools, like say stoner schools, which are anti-tech by design, is one option, although I think it varies based on the school, and some of them are very into gender woo, which is not good. Um, the one I'm kind of leaning towards as the best option is probably just like a properly Christian school, ideally single sex. So not, as you say, like not one of these Christian in name only schools, like an actually Christian school. And even if we were some of the least pious parents in the school, I think you're probably opting into basically a good culture and value system, which hopefully leans away from um, internet brain melting.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, pretty much the only thing. And also, trusting that your kids will be okay in a way. I think I tend to towards doomerism because I'm just like marinating in all this stuff all day and kind of seeing
I
where
want to
it's.
ask you about that in a second, but go on.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like maybe that's just me being, HBD pilled, but I feel like, the biggest contributions I've made to my children was at the moment of conception. I gave them a certain set of genes. I think I'm doing relatively okay, depending on what the measuring stick is. I managed to get married. I don't have any serious degenerative diseases in my family. It's pretty much good. And I feel like at one point, especially because they're boys, they're men, I think what I can provide them with is the options, like sports you can do. There's adventures that you can go on, and also I can apply limitations to their lives, and also set standards. I think that's something that's it's hard to do, but it's extremely important, especially for boys. Like they have to have something to live up to. They have to have certain constraints on their lives. I, Coasting will not be an option in our home. There's going to be academic standards. There's going to be standards for certain sports that they're going to play and whatever they desire to do, but they have to do that to a certain standard. And I think that's all for their benefit. And obviously, I can only kind of give direction there, but their father is going to be the one who's going to, be the measuring stick there, and he'll have to kind of not force them, but set the standard, and provide guidance on how to reach it. So I think that's pretty much the recipe that I'm probably going to follow. I mean, my children are very small still, but given what I know, I've talked to a lot of people who either homeschool, also do confessional schools. For me, that seems to be the best recipe to do it. I think there are a lot of positives to homeschooling, but there's also a lot of I don't know, a lot of hidden negatives. What everyone talks about as well, like the problem of socialization, especially like for example in Romania, there's no infrastructure to homeschool. You really have to go completely outside the law. Essentially, you'd have to homeschool them in a different system. Like I would have to get a homeschooling system from the UK or maybe New Zealand or something, and then get that accredited through the Ministry of Education to somehow equivalent it to the local system. There's nothing like that. So it's an incredible workaround, if even possible. I think a handful of people have done it before, but it's not, it's not okay. I mean, it's not viable for us. So yeah, I think that's a recipe for me.
The episode is not over. There is another maybe 30 minutes of content, but it is behind a paywall. If you would like access to that content, if you would like to show support for the show, paid subscriptions are what keep it on the road, allow me to pay my producers, put food on the table, all that important stuff. The extended version of the podcast is available at my Substack, louiseperry.substack.com. That's where you can also find, as I say every week, bonus episodes, extended episodes, the MMM chat community, all of this. Please sign up for a paid subscription. It makes such an enormous difference to my ability to keep producing the podcast and grow it even bigger, produce more episodes, all that good stuff. There are other ways that you can show your support for the show as well. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can like us on YouTube. You can tell your friends and family how much you like the show. If you find it valuable, all of these things make an enormous difference to our ability to keep making it. Thank you so much.